Great. So welcome to our second exhibition that had just recently, you just returned to kind of normal operation for Space Scribbles. And we currently have a works on paper exhibition called Open, and we feature works by Sam Kelly, Jacob Janes, and Martin Dole. And so before we get started, I want to briefly introduce the artists, and then we're going to do a quick virtual tour of the exhibition. And then each artist is going to show some images, either of their own work or their influences or things that pertain to their creative process. So I'm just going to briefly introduce each artist. So Sam had earned his BFA in painting from Wright State University and his MFA in painting from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. He has exhibited his works nationally and internationally, including the CICA Museum in South Korea, the Room Contemporary Art Space in Venice, Italy, Broomfield Gallery in Boston, Massachusetts, as well as several galleries in New York City, such as Blue Mountain Gallery, Bowery Gallery, First Street Gallery, and Prince Street Gallery. And Sam currently lives and works in Dayton, Ohio. Jacob Janes is a painter living in St. Louis. He is a lifelong wrestler, returned Peace Corps volunteer, and mediocre skateboarder. Prior to earning his MFA from Marywood University, he also studied fine art at Lindenwood University and Mount Gretna School of Art. Jacob's paintings are figurative poems, playful, simplistic abstractions of common subjects born from a sense of necessity. He's currently an adjunct professor at Jefferson College. He's also shown at Four Pillars, Mount Gretna Artist Residency exhibition at Susquehanna Museum, which I think Sam, you and me and Jacob are also in the same show. He's also shown in Hauska Gallery here in St. Louis, St. Charles Community College in St. Charles, and many other places, including Bowery Gallery, Lancaster Gallery, and Kunst Gallery here in St. Louis. Okay, one more. Martin. Martin is a mixed media artist and educator. He received his MFA from the New York Studio School of Drawing, Painting, and Sculpture, and was the 2015 recipient of the Peter Rippin Royal Academy European Travel Grant, a 2016 artist in residence at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation, a 2017 and 18 Trussell Open Studio resident, and a 2020 and 21 New York Studio School Dumbo Sculpture Studio resident. He has been a guest speaker and critic at several institutions, including Pratt Institute, Fordham University, and Hunter College. He has also co-curated exhibitions throughout the New York metropolitan area and is a co-founder of the curatorial collaborative JMN Artists. Martin's work has been included in both group and solo exhibitions throughout the United States, most notably John Davis Gallery in Hudson, New York, and M. David & Co., Brooklyn. He currently teaches adjunct at Caldwell University in New Jersey. Great. All right. I didn't lose that many people, so that's a good sign. And so what we're going to do now is just I'm going to share screen. And so we're going to walk through the show together for folks that haven't really seen the show, and just briefly go over like how can you stay in touch with the artist and like certain things that you could do. So, okay. You guys can all see the screen, right? Okay. People are like coming in and out. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. You should be able to hear the music.
real quick, I can't believe how perfectly timed the music was with the slideshow.
Thank you.
It was the exact same length. Good job.
I know I have to play around a lot with it, but this really just worked out very perfectly. I did like have to change a few things about how the slide is progressing, but thank you. Just the rest of the tour is just showing you kind of the functions of the website, which is just individual exhibiting artists would have a section just to clarify what works belong to whose. And if you click under each name, it would link you to the website. And at the bottom, if you scroll down, there is a guest book that you can sign. We try to make it as user friendly as possible. And that way, at the end of the exhibition, anyone that signed a guest book and left the messages, I will then share that with the artists. And it's always just been fun to be able to do that too. I know it doesn't entirely replace, the in-person exhibition, but this is kind of the attempt to just kind of make up for like the lack of, space that we can do these things. So I'm gonna stop sharing the screen and share a little bit about the reason why I paired the music with this particular group of works and some of the things that I believe to be true about the show. And so something that stood out about Martin and Sam and Jacob's works are kind of the mark quality of the work and how they're all done on paper, yet a lot of those textures and the way that the marks build up, they almost transform a surface into object, and how image can also exist in a space where it almost looks like it just came off of a wall or like a very particular space. So the show Open refers to the process and mark making of the artists. And as the works evolve, they remain open to possibility and discovery. And the culmination of these marks communicate a journey into the unknown and the reward of informed spontaneity. And this particular music, I'm very drawn to kind of the Japanese music or even Eastern music because of the way that they value the void or the empty spaces, and how each mark they kind of, or each note, they just play a note and just let the rest of the echo take up the space. And so in terms of music, it's being read in successions of notes, whereas painting is being read as a whole. But all of these paintings that we're showing in this exhibition in some way feel as if they're just notes lingering and waiting to fall into place. These individual echoing notes act as linear marks that contract and culminate to form a larger whole, yet at the same time move in anticipation towards a transformative fixture. And every mark carries weight and rings true. And these are kind of the very immediate responses I had when I saw your work. And really, I took a lot of time thinking about what music I wanted to pair with it to really bring out that sentiment that I have towards your work. And so for each artist, I have sent kind of a brief questionnaire of things that you want to share and possibly something that is of interest to you. So everybody has some images to show, and I don't know who wants to go first. I feel like Sam, since your name is in the front, maybe it's a good idea for you to like show your slides, and then we can go
Sure.
to Martin, and then we'll just open the floor to a more kind of organic.
Okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen here real quick. Hopefully everyone can see this all right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead. So first thing I just want to say is I want to thank Misa for organizing this. She just has done a wonderful job. I really respond to the music she chose. I also want to congratulate and thank Martin and Jacob. I've really admired their work. I kind of been knowing their work before this exhibition, so it's really been great seeing us show together with this, and it's really an exciting opportunity. And I really didn't think of the paper aspect of that being something, knowing about that with Martin and Jacob until Misa paired us all together. Then I kind of realized not only did we have the mark kind of similarity, but also the paper similarity, which I just want to throw out one thing that I think is important for me, and it might be the same with Jacob and Martin. Probably the one thing that I love about working on paper is it doesn't feel so precious. And sometimes I'm sure you, the painters out there know this, that, when you buy, a canvas or a panel and something, sometimes, you invest all this money in something that's so well put together. There's this intimidation of starting out on something. And that's the one thing I love about paper. If it's not working well for me, I can cut it in half. I can tear it in half. I can add more paper. I can make it larger, make it smaller. So it's very easy, very versatile. But the images I wanted to show are not any of images of my work. I figured you guys saw a lot of all the images on the what Misa just showed. So I'm going to show you some images that for me really kind of make a connection to what I was thinking about with these works on paper. And they go in chronological order. So the first one is a fresco from Pompeii. And I think Misa makes an excellent point about them feeling like our work kind of has that sense of taken off a wall, and not like a sense of fresco or something. And that is something that I often think about a lot, that sense of time and sense of decay too. I think the destruction that nature kind of plays on an image can actually be quite beautiful. And so that's one thing that I'm always thinking about in my work, is that act of destruction plays a kind of a crucial part in the building up and the tearing down. So this is an image again from Pompeii that is just a knockout image, in my opinion. It's just so beautiful. It offers so much that I think about. And I think the one biggest thing is that I really respond to is the ambiguity. The image is there, but it's also not there. The figure is there, but then the figure disappears, again, through that maybe sense of decay. And I think in my work, I think about not having things so clear, not having things so understandable, not having the audience or the viewer make sense of something necessarily so easily. And that's what I love about seeing these old frescoes when they're decaying, is you lose some things. Some things are there, some things are not there. This is a relief sculpture in Rome. And again, that idea of building up texture, building up a sense of relief. I personally am I don't do any sculptures. I don't work in any sort of 3D. But when I work on my paintings, I often think about building that surface up and having an idea of that sense of texture. And especially reliefs like Donatello's, and this is a beautiful one, a beautiful image I think about a lot. And again, the idea of having the image come in and disappear, like with these legs over here, you see some legs, and then the sense of destruction or decay, then they're disappeared. And so you have to kind of fill in the blank a little bit. But I think that sense of how it builds off the surface is something I think about a lot. And I think in most of my works are very small. And I think all of ours in this show is probably fairly small works on paper. And so it's very easy to build up the surface. For me, I really have to be aware of that. I have to know, when it's getting too much, when I need to kind of sand down, for instance. So John Lees, if you guys don't know the artist John Lees, he's a painter that I really admire for the sense of working on a painting for a really long time. And one thing that I really learned from him was, building something up and tearing something down. So he'll often like sand down a painting. And he really seems to be aware of that surface. I should have included an image in here. But again, that sense of relief kind of rings true for me in my work. Fan portraits, which I absolutely love. I mean, anytime I'm in a museum, I'm always trying to locate the fan portraits in the museums. They're just so beautiful. They're so direct. They're so honest. They just offer everything. It's like there's not that, it doesn't, for me, it seems there's not that many ingredients in it. There's not like a ton of things going on, because they're done so well, because they're so direct, it's enough. And that's one thing I often think about with my work is, for me, at least in my images, I try not to have things be too chaotic. I guess I kind of try to think of simplifying things a little bit more. So I try to, I always think about what is not necessarily needed to be added into the painting, but what doesn't need to be added, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, not necessarily always adding things, but deciding what doesn't necessarily need to be added into the painting, which may just make it overly chaotic, maybe too visually loud, I guess I'm trying to think of. So this is just a beautiful image, also, that is an anonymous artist, 6th, 7th century AD. But it's something I think, again, I think about a lot, and all of these are very old images. And the frontality, I think, is something that I'm continuously drawn to, with like icon paintings like this, it confronting you right at the start of the image, and they're a very shallow sense of space, and then again that decay. And one thing I was noticing with Martin's work, I really loved how he did this. When he photographed his works on paper, he included the edges, and I really think that's a good move. And it's kind of like when I look at this image, you see it's not cropped, and it totally changes as if it was cropped probably. So you're able to see those kind of warped edges, which I really, really love. And that's another thing I love about works on paper, is it kind of takes on its own life on those edges there. And this is just such a odd, distorted, crazy, beautiful painting too. I mean, it's just, the invention of it is just unbelievable. So I've got this painting. Unfortunately, I was hoping to find a better image. And this is probably a very good image, but I have an image in my studio that's very old. It's an old image, and it's really has a sense of time to it that I really respond to. And this kind of feels like it's very polished and new, which maybe that's how it was. I have not seen this in person, but I would love to someday. But I think just the presence of it, when you look at it, this holy figure, really just knocks me down and hits you hard. And that's another thing that I think about with my work, is I want you to be confronted with something, and that person is kind of coming into your space, so to speak. And again, that sense of decay, destruction, that's always just so beautiful in these images. So a couple of years ago, I did the 4 Pillars artist residency that Misa and Jacob did this year. And I remember doing a transcription of this painting. And I just was unbelievably, again, thrown back at how wonderful an image like this is. And it really just got me started in thinking more along the lines of looking at of artists, before the Renaissance, and really getting excited about this, and this is kind of like the start for me of making this connection of images like this to my work. And I think this was probably the last one, this one or the next one. And the one thing that I really love about this, and I don't know if you guys know the artist Alex Cohen. Alex Cohen I met up in Mount Gretna, and he was the first artist really that talked to me a lot about frames, the importance of the frame, and how wonderful a frame can really help a painting. And so when I look at this, the frame itself is just so beautiful, and it works so well with the painting itself, that again, it reminds me of so for me, when I'm working on my paintings, every single part of the image has to work. Something like this curved down right in here, and I know it wasn't made this way. It was just probably through the sense of time that it kind of got destroyed. But those type of things that you see in here, that sense of those holes, or the sense of the texture at the top, and how it relates so well to this such a sensitive image, really relates well to me. The sense of sensitivity and the brutalness of the loss of time really hits home for me. And so this is an image, including the frame, that I really connected with. And so Alex really was the first one who talked to me a lot about how a frame can really enhance the painting. And I never really thought of it that way before, but after I talked with him and after I looked at this painting, it just really kind of hit home for me. So, and I believe, oh, this one, Andrei Rublev. Yeah, so this is the last one, I believe. And just another great image. Again, I just love the surface of it. It's very simple, it's very direct. The figures are just so beautiful. I kind of feel like these images for me, I can look at, for hours on end and be very, very satisfied. And I'm sure probably a lot of you guys hopefully feel this way too. It's just kind of everything you need from it, from a painting is there. So that is it for me. I will hand that over to you guys.
Thank you, Sam. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm just gonna hold tight and wait for everybody to go. And so Jacob, if you want to go ahead and share your screen.
Sure. Share. All right, here we go. I'm gonna make it full screen. Let's see. This seems to be acting a little bit funny. How does that look to you all?
It looks like you're not full screen. If you hit slideshow on the top right,
Oh, okay.
it should go into a full screen.
Well, now I can't get back to it. Yeah, I lost my bar at the top. Oh, there we go. Okay, slideshow.
There you go.
Thank you, Mika. All right. Thank you all for coming. I know it's a pretty small group. I know most of the people here are listening, so I appreciate you all showing up. Thank you, Sam and Martin, for doing this. I'm a fan of both of your, the work both of you do. Just met Sam today, really, and I've known Martin for a while. He and I have become friends. And thank you, Misa, for doing this, as always. So this is my painting studio in New York in St. Louis on the right. And we are inside of St. Laborious Church, which is now called Skate Laborious. It's a 19th century church in North City, St. Louis. Misa and I share a space. We really love it there. It's pretty grungy and there's a lot of activity. So it's a great way for us to, I think, stay connected with the community. Let's see. I just did this slideshow a couple months ago, so I'm going to navigate it a little bit differently today, probably going through my own work pretty quickly. Here is a Roman figure on the left and one of my interpretations of it on the right, just kind of quickly laying out how much I take from Greek vases, Roman frescoes, things like that. I really enjoy the simplicity. I enjoy the complex shapes. I enjoy how cohesive and approachable the work is. A Greek cup here in St. Louis. Had to throw it in here just because it's local. There are plenty of other examples I could have given. The complexity of the shape, right? These lines that we can, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer or not, but you know, even this line here connecting the feet and how that in some way relates to these larger masses up here, or you know, the torso, the robe over here, and the visual pathways through here, through the dark shape and all the variation in that. Those are things that I find pretty exciting. Or you know, even these diagonals relating to each other from that great distance, this heel to this shin to this forehead. it doesn't get better, hasn't gotten better. This is stuff that holds up really well for me. Giorgione, I think that most of the work that I do, especially recently, I relate strongly to the sensibilities of some of these Renaissance painters, especially the portraits. I love this repetition, the V between the fingers, the V on the neck, the shape of the chin or the hairline, just something that simple and how it's repeated throughout the composition. That keeps me hooked, that keeps me going back to painting. But there are other things as well. The emphasis on value, the emphasis on flatness. Another thing I find myself doing often is having a ground that goes all the way down, which we see on the right side of this composition, and something different on the left. And just that very subtle move creates so much movement in the composition. Corot, I love Corot. I could do a whole slideshow talk of just Corot. He's the freshest painter ever. I love his figures. I love his landscapes. I would say that I appreciate his paintings for many of the same reasons that I do Titian's or Giorgione's. Chuck Bowdish just recently passed away, as I'm sure most of you know. He really hits a nail on the head for me. That there's so much searching and maybe emotion in the work that I respond to. But of course, they're really hard won, pared down, incredible little paintings. Most of the time, I think he works small, but I know he has some larger works as well. Actually, I don't even know how big this is, but it to me reads as sort of a smaller painting. The Economy, that to me is really exciting, and they say it takes a lot of hard work to make something look easy, and that's what he does. And I could easily say the same for these other artists coming up. Scott Smith was my professor in undergrad and kind of a mentor to me. I have a lot of his work hanging around the apartment. These drawings are killer. Just the moments of clarity and how just a few of those can really carry the painting. He's so intentional on finding a few key places to pull you in and having those contrasted with some of the more ambiguous or less clear, less resolved areas. Mark Weber, who's here with us today, I could have put any number of his paintings in this slideshow, but this one is hard to look away from. So here it is. I think there are pretty obvious and strong connections to Roman frescoes, a lot of scumbling and built up surface that relates to all the works on paper and the show we're talking about today.
Jacob,
yeah.
are you doing Mark's painting right now?
Yes.
It froze on Scott's. I don't know if that's for everybody else. So there you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Well, I'll just sit here for a moment so y'all can take it in. But really wonderful. And, I don't know how many of you all listening have really spent time inventing figures, but some of these, the light in there and how incredibly difficult it is to find the light that describes the volume and, isn't just a corny imagined skin tone, but to do an invented figure composition with these types of color relationships, it blows my mind. And I don't think very many people at all can pull off something like that. So kudos, Mark. Kevin Kincaid, who is a close friend of Mark's. I have a couple of his in here just because they're so different. I'm realizing how off-centered this image is. Very pared down abstractions, uses color much differently than the example we just looked at Mark's work. Just going to keep moving here. One of Kevin's figurative paintings, I really like the back and forth here. I think there are pretty strong similarities. The abstraction is more recent. I don't know when exactly this is from. I'm guessing the late 90s or early 2000s, not really sure. Some of my work, which I'm actually just going to quickly click through. These are works on paper. I thought it'd be better to focus on some oil paintings, maybe. Some of these are in the show. This is from this year. I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but hopefully some of the things that I value and the other paintings come through in this work and this next one as well. These were hanging on our living room wall, but they just recently found a home. So it was nice to, I think of them as 18-year-olds, you know, it was nice having you, it's time to go. So this is from the summer. Misa and I were doing the 4 Pillars program in Mount Gretna over the summer. I developed some good habits while I was there that I've had difficulty continuing since we've left. Having a studio attached to the home, having access to so many wonderful subjects out in the landscape, or, you know, out in the world, out in the landscape. Just the convenience and the accessibility of things it's hard to recreate that being back in St. Louis. So I'm struggling a little bit to figure out how to get back into the studio, but I do have a plan. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I see myself getting away from the figure and even getting away from the landscape. But even these houses, I think of them as portraits. What I mentioned earlier, the shoulder and the Giorgione having the front edge, having the subject against it on one side and then the ground against it on the other. Pretty flat paintings. To me, they're more or less all portraits. And this is my last slide. This is maybe my favorite painting I did over the summer. This is one of Misa. We sat for each other for maybe 45 minutes each. And I didn't finish the painting, and then she walked out because we were done with the session. And I later just picked up my paintbrush, not even looking to see what color was on it, and just drew in there to fix some things that were bothering me. And that seemed to be a good place to leave it alone. So this is one that I'm pretty happy with. And I think it also is quite a bit different than everything else I shared. And that's all I have for this slideshow. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jacob. It's good to see the works along with kind of the things that influenced you. And I know so much of it already because that's what we talk about every single day, but it's still really good to hear you like kind of go through that. Once again, I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm just really gonna hang tight. So Martin, if you want to go ahead and show your images and then we can dive in. And welcome that just got in.
Sure. All right, so you should all be able to see. I did not put together any sort of traditional slideshow. And I'm going to talk about some influences that I think would be familiar to a lot of the audience in regards to my own work. And what I wanted to focus on were a few key topics that I think were brought up in the previous conversations we just had. Back last year, around August, I had the opportunity to the kind of once in a lifetime opportunity to sort of take control and curate a space of my own work at a time where I've been thinking a lot about how work engages with space. And I guess what I'd like to talk about first, because it's so much a part of the show you put together, Misa, and I also believe a big part of Jacob and Sam's work is in a certain idea of music or musicality. I grew up in a very musical household. So my influence was always auditory growing up. I did not grow up in a very visual art space household. So that, you know, I wasn't looking at a lot of paintings growing up, but I always loved to draw, and I always associated the act of drawing with music, and particularly with scales and with moments of quiet next to moments of loud. And the way that you can orchestrate a song is, I think, very similar to the way that you can orchestrate a painting or a drawing, or then when you kind of pull the lens out even further, the way that you can orchestrate a space. And I think auditory movements are very relative to physical real world movements. So when you begin to orchestrate spaces, whether physical spaces that the body can navigate, or sort of metaphysical spaces that the eyes can navigate, you're leading people up and down and around and in and out at different speeds. So in that way, I was thinking a lot about how my work engages with greater spaces. And then another influence that I would like to bring up is back in around I guess it would have been around 2016. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to travel through Europe. And my original goal was, you know, to focus on kind of the usual suspects. I was going to go sit in front of the Rembrandt's The Night Watch. I was going to go to London to see the Greek marbles. But something interesting ended up happening. I became especially focused on sacred spaces that I was visiting. And then also, well, early Greek and Roman, but in terms of something a little more relative, this sort of Quattrocento idea of space and movement, sort of before the image becomes more refined and naturalistic, there's this moment where the space is so well defined and so clear and so familiar, yet the mark takes on something less naturalistic and more of a translation, like a sort of translated mark of these spaces. And a lot of these predella panels that I was particularly engaged in and looking at, it also became clear that they were made with an idea of their frame and with an idea of the space that they were going to be shown in. So it became sort of a whole, the whole activity, the whole idea of painting became sort of a whole idea of creating and of space. and of sculptural space as well as painterly space, and how those two in conversation can endorse each other. And so I found myself in this opportunity where I was able to curate a space and really think about how my paintings, the objects that I was making, and then the space itself could all communicate with each other. Let me X out of this image. Let's see, try to navigate my website. I also became very interested in the way that time can be expressed in a piece of artwork. I'm looking for a particular painting from this series. Which for some reason I am having trouble finding. So in this particular painting, I also became interested in time elapsing in a sort of linear narrative, almost, let's say, like a comic strip moving across a surface. So one gesture, one mark to the next, to the next, to the next, assuming that the viewer is reading from left to right. It became sort of a smaller vista inside of a larger structure. And what's going to happen now is I'm probably just going to end up rambling a lot. So maybe we should just open this up to conversation. I always find it a little better to do the back and forth conversation than just to try to talk about a bunch of stuff.
Those are good thoughts, and I just like my notepad is filled with and I'm like, oh god, I don't know how I'm gonna. I was like, stop talking. There are too many talking points. But thank you. Like I think, yeah. I mean, everything you're saying, like all of you, it's very relatable, and I'm learning a lot from you all because I feel like I have a very different process. I mean, of course, like being around Jacob, it has definitely informed a lot of my own painting decisions. But there are things that really kind of stand out to me, which is kind of the mystery of all of the things that you're trying to grapple with. And you mentioned, I think like both of you, if not all of you, have like some of you have mentioned the economy of marks, kind of playing around like the idea between complexity versus simplicity, and how there's certain subtle decisions that create a lot of dynamism and the musicality of marks, and how these things don't really have to exist just in one space, but they can span across. You know, you're talking about sculptural going into painterly, and I don't think these two things are mutually exclusive. And so one thing that kind of stand out to me is how much of that space you all are kind of just kind of playing around with and exploring that space of uncertainty. It's not a very, I feel like it's kind of unusual doing that with painting, because I think people associate painting more or less with image, and I know you're still dealing with image, but it's almost like you guys are kind of diving into the structural side of it, the pictorial structure. And so there's a quote that I was kind of thinking about when you guys were talking, and I'm just gonna briefly, I mean, it's a short quote. We got to visit the Milton Resnick Foundation over the summer, and some of the late paintings of Resnick is just, it's not it's not about the image, it's more about the experience because of the way that these marks have built up to become a texture, if not a space, where you can almost feel like you're walking into a fog. And so he said, it's not about how you put paint together, but how painting puts you together. And I feel like that's a really nice sentiment. That's very relatable when I look at all of your work, because so much of the act of making is also about how you evolve with these things. And you all have mentioned more or less like time and how to engage time using, for Sam, you're talking about ambiguity as something that you intentionally employ to engage time. It does slow people down, but it's not ambiguous as in you don't really know what you're doing to the picture or the image. It's about how you're leaving things open in a way that people can enter in and out, and form and experience through that. And so I don't really know where I'm going with this. I'm just kind of sharing my own kind of reaction as I was hearing it. But there's also another thing where I'm thinking about, which is like the conviction of marks and how each mark matters. And I don't really know what you guys think about it, but if you have any particular thoughts about what you heard from one another that you feel like you want to respond to, feel free to do so.
I would to respond to something Sam earlier, talking about changing the size of the paper, or what he liked about using paper. There are a couple of things for me. First of all, just the practicality of it. I probably have, I don't know, 50 or 100 paintings or works on paper in this apartment, but you wouldn't know it, versus, you know, Misa having 50 paintings from the studio school, and how, you know, it takes up a lot of space. And so just like being pretty nomadic for a while, and it met my needs too, right? Like if I'm paring things down, if I'm trying to find simple solutions, I'm trying to solve something with, by providing, you know, little information, it makes sense that I would need a smaller surface to do something like that. So for me, that's why I worked on paper. Save space, save time, it's convenient, but also I like how it feels in my hands. There's something about just touching paper, handling paper, the edges. I like pretty much everything about it. So I don't know, Martin, how you relate to the material, but those are some things that I value about it.
Well, I mean, for me, the material is the beginning. Before there's even a mark, before I even begin working, what I choose to work with sort of begins what I'm doing, because I work based on the impulse to make, and I kind of try to fight away putting it towards any sort of end image until I find that thing through the process of working on it. So in that sense, what I begin with is maybe one of the most important pieces of where the thing goes or how the thing starts.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to that I think Jacob brings up, that for me, I think really works well too, is, you know, for me at least, when you're working on a canvas at a certain size, and you know, let's say it needs to be bigger, you just look at it and you're saying, yeah, I need to add something to the left or to the right. For me, what's nice about working on paper is that, again, I can add to that, and it not being so physically difficult. Of course, you can add, you know, make a diptych or something like that, but it's just nice for me being able to collage kind of in a way, a bigger or smaller even size. And I think Martin brings up a great point too, is the whatever you're working on first really dictates that journey. And I like really working on this nice 300-pound Arches watercolor paper,
Mhm.
which is almost like cardboard, and it can really hold up to like some real aggressive, attacking that I do. But one thing I would add, and I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this, is when I work small, I feel like I don't necessarily work quicker or slower than when I'm working large. Like I feel like I'm working the exact same way. When I work large, I have to work in a different process. Obviously, I have to cover bigger territory and bigger surfaces. I have to get my arm more involved and things like that. But when I'm working small, I take just as much time working on something, at that scale as I would, 50 inches or something. I'm curious to know from you guys working on a smaller scale, if that's what you are doing, does that have any effect on your speed or your pace?
Yeah, well, when I work on the small work, I might not be constantly working on them, but I'm going to work on, let's say, 10 at once, and they're going to sit there sometimes for a very long time. Because I also think working at that smaller scale is a game changer in the sense that even the smallest move relative to what you're working on makes a huge difference. So when you make a mark, I mean, you better be committed to what that mark is. And it's also true that if you make that mark and it doesn't sit well or it doesn't work, you're going to have to figure out a way to either get it to work or to remediate that mark, which is a whole other process versus working, let's say, on something that's 18 by 24 or even, the scale of like a human body. I mean, if you make a small decision, you can kind of put that into the background. On these small little surfaces, everything's right there in front and it's all visible at once.
Yeah, to piggyback that, normally in the studio, when we're working on a canvas or a panel, there's this back and forth, right? Like you make the mark and then you step back and look at it and see how it affected the composition. But with the little works on paper, you're already stepped back, right? That distance is already there. And I think it forced me to learn a lot in a shorter period of time, spending a few years working on paper. Since we're already talking about material, another thing I wanted to mention is I'm normally using gouache, and I think it is the most probably cooperative medium I've ever worked with. It is so easy to get it to do exactly what I want it to do. And sometimes, I will try to wash off what's on the paper. So if too much accumulates, and then I'm left with something nice and it kind of looks like a relic, but it's a good thing to work on top of. But even the stickiness of the material, how easily it can become like watercolor, the ways in which I kind of have to fight it that are different than oil. I actually really like that about gouache, and maybe it's just because I have quite a bit more experience using it, but I really like the handling, and I think that the ways in which it resists what I want it to do, I can kind of enjoy, if that makes sense. It can push back a little bit.
So I actually have a question for you all. Just looking at the exhibition that we put together, how much does subject matter to you guys? And how have you overcome or navigated challenges in the process of image making? And you can interpret it however you want, but
I struggle with this a lot because I think people are always interested in what the subject of the work is, and it's not always clear to me what the subject is, because a lot of times I'm creating based off of impulse. But something I've come to realize more and more as I'm making these things is that I think the subject ends up being time. And because the subject is time, even though I might begin with one idea, through the process, I'm going through maybe hundreds of ideas, and then sort of settling at a place where all those ideas have accumulated. So in a way, because time is the subject, each piece contains multiple subjects. And I think the way that I assess whether it's at a point where it's complete is just simply that the visual structure, the format, that it feels balanced. It feels like, in formal terms, if I was to add something or take something away or manipulate something, it would no longer be the thing that I'm looking at. So yeah, I guess that's my roundabout way of saying, that's a particularly difficult question.
That's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Martin that I have, some ideas of what I want to explore maybe in a specific work, but I don't lock myself down to that in the beginning. I try to be as open as I can, and I usually try to discover maybe the subject through the process. And so usually I think the hardest thing, or maybe not, I shouldn't say the hardest thing, but sometimes the painting really doesn't get exciting until I can really sink my teeth into a subject, until I can find something through the process. Then once that happens, then I'm cooking, I'm really getting involved with it. So a lot of times the beginning is just kind of sometimes a bit arbitrary in a way. And then what I also think about is not only the subject, but what's it about too. Maybe the content of it, and what's the message behind it. And so that is something I can't really project or force or think about too early, because again, it's just too early. And I'm not the type, and I don't know, it seems like Jacob and Martin are probably similar this way, I think, but I'm not the type who sits down and conceptualizes as an idea, and then I'm going to execute that, because it can go down so many different paths that I don't want to handcuff myself to that particular thing, because then all I am trying to do is fit like a square peg in a round hole, and a lot of times it just won't fit.
Well, I see content as being a huge burden in contemporary art right now. Because I see a lot of focus simply on content and leaving out ideas of form, ideas of things that are actually intrinsic to like the medium that we're using and the history of the thing that we're engaging with. So to me, content was always secondary. And, I think content, you can have any idea of content that you want as the maker, but inevitably it's the viewer that's really going to dictate what the content of the work ends up being. How we look at work 100 years from when it's made is most likely not the way that people were looking at it when it was made. So the content becomes a very different subject anyway. So, I think we all end up engaging in content because we are making something at a certain time, and we ourselves are content. But outside of that, I don't know if I want to, in my own practice, spend my time considering content when there's all these other things that I think are more important to my medium, and the content will be there inevitably.
I want to make a comment on this. It's something I've been thinking about lately, simply because I've been struggling to go into the studio and invent figures for a while. I think, well, I'm going to say something about subject too. Misa, you were ask a question about subject. Sometimes Misa and I go to a figure drawing group. We're both pretty inconsistent, but seeing the model under the light, it blows my mind every time I show up. And it's so profound, and I never have enough, I feel like I'm short on time to communicate what I'm seeing, when I have 20 minutes to work in front of the model. And so um, you know, that's obviously one thing that can dictate what kind of art someone is making. But the reality is, as artists, we have this privilege to help define culture, help. We are subjects, and we are able to give ourselves a voice, and hopefully people around us a voice also. And that's incredibly profound to me. And that's something, you know, maybe bigger than art itself, right? There are other things out there. There's a whole world of things that can be addressed. And to me, that's really exciting. And so anyways, that's, I think when I'm doing figures, it seems, I'm sure hopefully interesting to other painters, but I don't expect the general population to have that same type of response. But obviously, you know, once you get into political issues and things like that, you know, people tend to get more excited over those things. So as a student, I was always pushing that to the back burner because I know I can figure this out. I don't need someone to teach me content. I don't need someone to teach me subjects. I need people to teach me how to see, how to make paintings. And so form was always the focus. But, you know, everything changes. And I see myself hopefully growing as an artist. And I hopefully have a good foundation to build on, I think, and address other subjects, other content.
Yeah, I think normally in my own teaching and discussion with artists, it's always surrounding form. And I believe in that. I believe that form is the vessel for content. If there's no form, you don't bother saying anything. You can write a book, or I mean, that's just maybe my very harsh way of kind of dealing with some paintings that I don't necessarily agree with or feel that they enrich me in any way. But there are paintings that I would encounter. You know, I never was into Renaissance paintings. I hated it. I just didn't care. So I saw a Medici collection. I saw Pintormo and Bronzino in person, and it just blew my mind because it is about the content as much as it is about abstraction. It's about the structure that is holding all the images together. So to me, that is where I want to be, which is why I'm looking at Masolino now. And it's like, wow, I didn't think I would ever end up doing copies from that and finding so much joy from it, because so much of it is also very content driven, but the structure is there. So you're getting both kind of the content side of narrative, but also the visual poetry. And so that is where I am. And that's the interest that is kind of holding me through all the works that I'm creating. It's still a formal inquiry, but there's a very specific kind of hook, like, or an anchor upon which I build my image. And so my question is, what are your priorities currently as artists? Like, whether it be formal inquiry or content inquiry, like anything, like, is there anything that is kind of driving that creative process or discovery right now for you all?
Well, to piggyback off what you were just saying, Misa, I guess the simplest or maybe most eloquent way that I can express this idea would be, so I much like you with Renaissance paintings, I did not have much need for Da Vinci, right? Like I had seen images in books a million times, good photographic representations. I didn't get it. I mean, I saw it as like, oh, that's a really well constructed painting, or there was something very dead about it to me. And then I finally had the opportunity to stand in front of a few great Da Vinci's in person. And I realized that something else happened when you were in front of the painting. There was a quiet breathing that happened where the figures in the painting actually inhaled and exhaled very slowly, a sensation that you could not get through any sort of other representation of these subjects. But then I think about, well, what happens now, you know, post the 20th century and where painting has gone, and where humanity is gone and the new things we've discovered and photography being developed. I guess I place a huge I've set up for myself this sort of idea that, well, it's no longer necessary, as it was with Da Vinci, let's say, for me to use the figure as the catalyst to capture that humanity. And the humanity in the Da Vinci was this idea of breathing, right? I can use paint and my medium as what it is without needing it in service to any sort of overarching, I'm going to say, image, such as being a recognizable image of a person or a thing. Can I use the medium to give the viewer the sensation of breathing without giving them an image of something that breathes, but just through the material and having them sense it? Because when I confronted a lot of great artwork, I had transcendent experiences that had nothing to do with the image in front of me, but through the mastery of the composition and the paint and the handling and the conviction of the artist, they conveyed something that I could physically respond to. Can I do that? I don't know, but I feel like that's my prerogative as a contemporary artist, as a painter. That's what I want to concern myself with, and just find out if I can even do it.
I have to admit, I forgot the question.
Just kidding. The question is,
I don't know if there was one.
what are your priorities as an artist, whether it be a formal inquiry,
Oh, yeah.
anything
I
that
think,
pertains to you?
yeah, I think for me, there's so many things that we have to do, that we have to juggle. I mean, Martin brings up many great points. I mean, we got to juggle color, we got to juggle texture, drawing issues, composition, form. I mean, all of it, subject matter, how you connect with your own work. And that's what I think makes it so difficult and so wonderful to be an artist and handle all these issues, is because there is so much complexity. There's so much out there that you have to take as a priority and take as important, that and you're learning. I feel like for me, I'm learning something new each and every day when I look at an artist and I see something in there that reminds me of, this is so important, that there's just such a multitude for it all.
Jacob, do you have thoughts? You don't have to.
Not at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I think I don't really know if I have any real thoughts, but I'm just thinking about the metaphor of Marx and the dichotomy of Marx, which is what Graham talks about a lot at the studio school. And sometimes we can use that in service to representation, and sometimes they can exist as their own, But I think one thing that it's hard for me when I have to rely on just the quality of Marx or colors or anything outside of representation is that I lean on my habits a lot, and my habits are not always well informed. And so my question is how do you stay informed about your own work, whether it be trying to create something new? It's a weird balance between intuition and kind of striving for more. And I'm just curious how you find yourself in that space. Maybe that's a very ambiguous question. I'm trying to articulate what I'm getting at. But.
Yeah, for me, I would rather hear Martin and Jacob's take on it before I respond.
So it sounds like you're asking about navigating intuition versus making informed decisions.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking? I destroy paintings more often than I make paintings, so I'm not a good person to ask. I take a lot of risk. I'm probably overly reliant on my intuition, and yeah, sometimes it's ahead of our intellect and sometimes it's not. And there's nothing really more I have to say about it. But it seems to be, it's there. And I guess there's a reason why I keep going to it.
Yeah, well, one thing I think that Jacobs brings up is, and I loved how he said, he destroys more paintings than makes. I kind of feel like that too. You make 10 paintings and you get one good one out of that 10, and I think that is a very healthy process and a very important process. I'm not sure if this answers your question, Misa, or goes to the point, but I think that is something that is really important for artists to do is to make a lot of work, and not everything you make is going to be great. Not everything you make is going to be saved. That act of destruction is just so vital. I feel that I just loved how Jacob brought that up.
This is also a time for Q&A, in case that was not clear, because I posted on the chat box. If anyone has any questions, ask. People have their mics muted, but if you have any questions, feel free.
I do want to say real quick, thank you, Mark and Ben and Garrett. I don't know the rest of you, but
so
thank you all for coming, everyone in the audience. It means a lot. No, I just want to make a point to say that right now, because sometimes we close out kind of quickly.
Okay.
And anyway.
Nick, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for doing this. It's been a ton of fun and really interesting, and the work looks really beautiful. So thank you to you all. So Sam, you and I have talked about art a good deal, but I don't know that I've ever heard you explicitly talk about your own artwork. So it was really great to hear that. And I really liked hearing you talk about, the effects of time on objects. And it felt very human, it felt like we were talking about humans in the face of time and mortality and stuff like that, and obliteration by time, and using kind of paintings and artwork as a stand-in for us. And then, there's generally a figure in work of yours that I've seen. And I also feel like, I've always assumed that there's a mirror, but I don't know that that's a mirror.
Yeah.
And you don't have to tell me if it is or if it's not. But I would love to hear you talk a bit about just kind of, conception of the self. And I definitely saw the word death in one of your titles, so there is an allusion there. But I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit if you want to.
Yeah, actually, so I'm a big Jake Berto fan. And if you look at Jake Berto, then you'll clearly know what that shape is. And I'm also a big John Walker fan. And during graduate school, I was really interested in finding, a subject matter within abstraction, and, trying to find certain repetitive shapes or certain repetitive of movements within a painting that I can kind of repeatedly incorporate into the work. So I really have to give credit to where credit is due, and that is to Jake Berto. That mirror type shape. There's a beautiful drawing that he did, mirror and model and mirror, I think it is, or mirror and model, at the Phillips collection. I think it was made in the early 60s, that he did, of a figure in that mirror shape. And it's just a lovely composition, a lovely painting. And if you look at a lot of John Walker's Alba shape paintings, and Jake Berto's that Berto shape kind of thing that I call, they repeatedly use that shape in their work. And I just kind of have stolen that in a way, to be quite honest. And it's something that I can't let go of. It's a shape that I can allow myself to repeatedly have a connection to. And over time, what's happening is, for me at least, it's starting to resemble or feel like this holiness, a presence, and I'm really in all my paintings, I'm the figure. That's really me. And the shape really is me seeking knowledge, me seeking truth, understanding of what painting is, of what life is. And I'm always and that shape is really my connection to what painting is my marriage to painting. And so I think about those two lives, like myself and painting, and the shape really represents painting in a way. And so I'm always trying to seek an understanding of what painting really is. And that's really coming, for me at least, that's how I try to connect to that shape. And it's kind of like my source of knowledge. So yeah, hopefully that kind of answers your question, Nick. And also I'm really glad you're on the talk here. So yeah, hopefully that answers that.
Thank you so much. That's so cool. I love thinking of a painting as a mirror.
Yeah, no, it originally, I think that's what Jake Berto had, was model and mirror, and it was a figure in that mirror. And then he took that shape and just kind of made it into its own like abstracted image.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Comments? It's okay if you don't. Jacob, are you?
You're singing.
Oh yeah. It's just, I don't know. I'm sorry. Is there any like upcoming exhibitions from any of you that, if you want to share with the audience? Anyone?
Yeah, I have an upcoming exhibition. My name's Garrett Moore.
Oh, hi.
Hey, we have a show at Square Halo Gallery in downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania, on September 2nd. It's going to be worth coming to see. That's all I got to say.
Congrats,
Thank you.
Garrett.
Hey,
Yeah.
love you guys.
Yeah, a lot of painters in here, which is nice.
I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi, Mark.
Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to congratulate you on this. Can you see me? Because I don't know whether I'm.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we
great.
can see you.
Okay. So congratulations on this and Space Scribbles in general. And it was really interesting and informative. And I don't know how much longer you're going to go, but I have to check out. So I just thought I'd thank you and say hope to see you all soon.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mark.
Thanks,
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Mark. He's got a nice voice. Wow, that's some nice voice on a radio.
Well, he used
You know-
he used to run a radio station.
But I didn't notice how nice.
Yeah, I just thought of an exhibit, not mine, but the Leland Bell exhibit at the New York Studio School is coming up.
Man, oh, when is that?
Yeah. It opens, I believe, September 9th, I believe, and goes like October 23rd. And there is a panel talk on September 28th.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone's going to be in New York to see that. I'm hoping to check that out.
Cool. Any more exhibitions announcement? Okay.
They're too far into the future.
Okay, yeah, that's true. So just some comments from people. If you didn't see it in the chat box, Madeline Kobe said, "What a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Jacob, Martin, Sam, and Misa. I appreciate you sharing your work and thoughts today. Inspiring. I have to hop off. Thank you all again." So that's from Madeline Kobe. And Maria, who's with us here now, and who also will be exhibiting with Space Scribbles for the next month. Very much for this conversation. This show is very beautiful. So yeah, I appreciate you all just being here. I know it's busy for everybody. Semester starting up. I think most of us are teaching. It's crazy. So hence my brain is just like not quite functional, but I appreciate your patience and just being vulnerable and open and sharing your work and sharing your thoughts. And I guess people will have your info. If they have any questions, they can reach out. I'm just kind of volunteering you all for that. But the show goes on until August 31st. And I will be sure to post this recorded video onto YouTube so people can revisit if they missed it. And I think that would wrap up the talk. If anyone has any other last final thoughts, feel free to share, and then we'll just wrap it up.
I feel like this went well, Misa and Martin and Sam. I feel like this went well. So good
Yeah.
job to you.
Thank you guys. Thank you again, Misa, Martin, and Jacob. You guys are great.
Yeah, Misa, thank you for organizing this. And I mean, it's been a real pleasure to, show with you, Sam, and you, Jacob. I admire both your work tremendously as well. And it's just nice to feel a part of such a rich community.
Yeah, thank you. I love all your work, and I just feel spoiled. People can say no, but like the fact that you all said yes, and I got to pair people that I really feel like speak a very specific language, and their paintings delivering that is very unique. And so thank you all for being here and, taking part in this. So, all right. So I guess
Awesome.
that concludes the talk. And I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday before the school craze starts.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone, see you soon.
Have a good lunch, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.